Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast. I'm Tracy Chernoff, and I've spent my entire professional career in HR. Each week, we'll explore the delicate balance between people and business with the aim to reconnect the two and create meaningful outcomes. Listen in as I share my own experiences, challenge the status quo, and chat with guests from various industries about our mission to bring the human back to human resources. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here for another week. Have you ever asked yourself how and why are people, struggling to get along in the workplace? Why are we always talking about how to communicate with one another, how to drive culture, how to drive engagement? Well, I have as well, and it's the reason why we continue to talk about this on the podcast, because it is an ever elusive topic, and there's so much to break down. And so I have with me on the podcast this week, Antoni Lacinai, who really is going to be able to guide us in a lot of these topics. So his business passion, let me tell you a little bit about him. His business passion is to decipher the mysteries of human connection, especially around conscious leadership, employee engagement, and customer service. As a global speaker, he's been invited to speak on most continents, and he has coached thousands of executives and teams around the world. When large international organizations or national governments need to elevate, for instance, their leadership, sales, and presentation skills, they reach out to Antoni and his unique blueprint called Communication Insights. To date, he has written and co-written 14 books and hundreds of columns and articles. He's a regular columnist in various magazines and is often interviewed on Swedish national TV. And a fun fact about Antoni is that he lives in the south of Sweden, where he spends most of his time with his family and friends between assignments. He's also debuted as a fictional writer in 2020. I feel like 2020 was a wonderful time to broaden our horizons. So welcome, Antoni. I want to hear about this fictional writing before we jump into it.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, so I've written 13 books when it comes to communication, motivation, and so on, and one book about the fictional writing. It was really fun. I wrote that together with a friend. We went on 3 vacations together, brought our spouses so they can serve us, and then we just wrote the book. And it's about neighbors, very non-charismatic neighbors who live their miserable lives, and it's a fun book. We had fun writing it. People have fun reading it.
I love it. Well, I thank you for sharing this added layer to who you are and your experience in this thing called life. But I, for one, am really excited to break down how you even got into this area of expertise around human interaction and communication and coaching on these things.
You know, when you feel that you have a knack for something, like a talent for something, and you start to explore it and you're curious about it and you improve as you go along, I think that's basically what it was for me. I am like a practical idiot. I cannot even assemble a simple IKEA Billy bookshelf, without making a mistake. It's just one of my kryptonite flaws. So I had to be good at something else. And I guess that was one of those things. I realized early on that when I spoke up, people listened. So I developed that kind of skill, starting in sales, going into marketing, realizing quickly that it wasn't all about speaking, it was about listening more than anything else. But still, that kind of became my core competence. And I've been kind of searching, as you also said, I've been searching for insights around workplace communication mostly for the last decades. And I left the corporate career myself back in 2006 to start my own company to only do this and not care about, most of your listeners probably know about internal politics. They know about the whole kind of struggle sometimes in collaboration and so on. I have an easy life right now because it's only me. But I thrive when I am able to help good people at good companies who care for other people, who care for the planet, who want to make a good difference. That's where I want.
That's amazing. One of the things that you had first shared with me a few months ago when we first connected was that you just want people to get along, that this is the underpinning of what you do. And I was thinking about this before we started recording today. And, I think actually one of the things that we mentioned, or that you mentioned right before we started recording, is that we are living through uncertain times. And I think that that's probably the mystery of life, is that there are always uncertain times, and how we navigate them remains this mystery and question, like, do we ever have certain times? This is my existential thought of the day. But with that, I want to know from you, with these uncertain times, as you mentioned, we are living through them, inflation, especially in the US, it's just, I don't have to go into it, right? But how do we impact one another when we are not separating ourselves from the stress of life? Like, is there a way even to separate ourselves from that?
Great question, as many of your questions are, by the way. I want to just rewind a bit and go back to what you said. There are always uncertain times. This is not unique. Sometimes it's worse than other times, but I've been looking into this now because this is one of the things I get as a topic. People ask me, hey, can you come and speak about engagement and collaboration? The times are uncertain and worrisome. And I come to the conclusion, it's always uncertain times. 100 years ago, 1923, this is recorded in 2023, we just had a First World War. Tens of million people died. We had the Spanish flu, the pandemic, where 50 to 100 million people died. We were about 2 billion people at that time, not 8 billion. And we were going into the worst recession ever. That was 100 years ago. I think that they could probably say that they had uncertain times as well. And ever since then, we have 2 world wars, we have cold wars, we had nuclear threats, we had terror acts, we have, downturns in the economy, 2008, we had, all of those things that happened since then. So it's not unique in any way. And even if we can have personal tragedies, from a human perspective, this is just, it's a Tuesday, it happens all the time. So I just wanted to go back to say that first. So we can have that and also understand that as a mindset, if we just take 2 steps back, realizing that, okay, fine, sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. This seems to be a downturn right now. And your question was, how do we cope with it? Was it, by the way, because I went on this
pretty much.
route
I mean, it's kind of like 2 parts, like how do we cope, but also how do we lash out when we're not coping?
Okay. So this goes into one of my favorite things when it comes to psychology, the compassion-focused theory, where you have 3 different systems in your brain that dominates in different times. So can I take that as an example now?
Please.
There are 3 kind of systems in your brain that go berserk sometimes or gravitates towards. So the first one is the threat system. And the threat system is super active. It's like a bodyguard in the brain, just wanting you to survive, right? So if times are particularly uncertain, if you feel threatened in any way, if your workplace is toxic, or if you worry about paying the next mortgage, or if there's something else that kind of makes you feel, I'm not going to survive this, then the threat system will be super active. And what happens then is that you lose possibilities to be constructive and creative and productive and so on, because you can't get access to the higher functions of the brain. And this is what happens many times where we feel that we are threatened. If we focus completely on the uncertainties of life, probably we will end up here in conflicts, in power moves, in me trying to get ahead on the expense of you, running around in the right corridors, being in the right meetings, trying to look like I am, you can't get rid of me. I'm so important. Whatever it is, right? Everything you do to just get ahead or get above, kind of get your nose above water, so to say. And that creates a culture, a communication, I call it communication culture since I'm a communication nerd, but it's an organizational culture, a leadership culture that is toxic and not good. And everyone just craves empathy at that point, right? You want compassion, empathy, some sort of safety, but you don't get it if you have a whole organization focusing on that. I call the motivational mindset is very from-oriented for the group or the team. But then you have something that is perhaps a bit better, at least. It's when you have the exploration system in your brain more active. Like our ancestors, hunters and gatherers, they found their bears or they found their berries. Something to eat. Things like that. And if that is active, then you at least are going towards something. You want to find something new, you want to explore. It could still be uncertain times, you could still be stressed, but you're not that anxious anymore. You might be frustrated, especially if you don't know where you're going. So in uncertain times, you might end up here where you want to do something, you just don't know how, and that creates a lot of stress and frustration in the organization. Hopefully you have some sort of respect to each other compared to the lower levels where it's only the threat system. And then you have the safety system or the comfort system or the soothing system in the brain, where you feel at ease, where people actually get along. This is a really good place to be, because now you can feel that you have the psychological safety, you can feel that you're in a good environment, you like your teams, team members, you like your boss, you like the people around you, you like your work. It's just a good place, unless you get too much of contentment going on, which means that you stagnate. You just want to protect and defend whatever you have. You don't reach for that kind of ultimate goal of being world class anymore. But I would rather prefer to have more of the safety or the soothing or the comfort system in place than I want the threat system in place. So for me, this is like a cocktail. Give me just 5% of the threat system, because I still want to, go from something that is not good, but I don't want to have the toxicity of it. I want to, be a bit dissatisfied. Why should I move otherwise? And give me like 20% or 40% perhaps of the exploration system. So I'm curious, and then give me the rest, like to feel psychologically safe, so I can be in a good place. If you have that mix and you do that over and over again, to have that kind of feeling of trust and knowledge sharing and collaboration and all that, then you are on the world-class level. I don't know if that was a too long explanation, but it's kind of an important thing for me.
I was hanging on every word, every single word. I mean, I guess my initial thought is, can you have people who are engaged or disengaged in both scenarios? Like, are there people who just thrive in this chaotic, toxic environment? And can those people thrive in the same, or, I should say in the other environment, which is safe and, more collaborative potentially? I ask this because I have worked in both environments and environments in between, that have maybe a little bit more than 5% of that that toxicity or that chaos, in the cocktail of the workplace. But I guess I'm thinking about the individuals that I have come across in my career who I couldn't imagine being successful in a safe environment because they contributed to the other environment that people are so often trying to get away from. So can people truly change what they're motivated by, or what environment they thrive in?
So, of course, in any context, you will always have some people who are really engaged, really motivated, and then you have some people who will not be as motivated and engaged. Of course, you will have that. And if you look at Gallup, for instance, the Gallup studies on employee engagement, they show it clearly that you have 10 to 35% in the workforce in the world that are actively engaged, doing discretionary efforts, rolling up their sleeves, saying, come on, let's do this. But you will also have, about 10% actively disengaged people, saboteurs and so on. And of course, the better your company is, the more fun you have at work, the more meaningful it is, the less of those you have, and the more engaged people you have. But it's not a clear cut. I mean, in my country, the way country I live in, one of the happiest countries in the world, we have 14% actively engaged people. So that's not a lot, And then Gallup says that the rest of the people in the middle are disengaged. And that's where I beg to differ. It's just too broad to say that everyone in the middle are disengaged. Some of them are pretty satisfied. It's a job, but they're satisfied anyway. And some of them are kind of grumpy. So you have all of them going on at the same time. But the thing here is that if you have the world-class level, as I call it, when you have this kind of mix of a little bit from, a lot more towards, and then you have the safety system in place as well, the comfort system. If you have that and you do that over and over again to come up to that kind of world-class level, life is not particularly easy because of it. Because on that level, you respectfully disagree. You're not in conflict, which you are on the lowest level. That's a conflict situation. Conflicts for me is when one person is trying to win over another person. That's it. It's a battle. It's what Putin is doing to Zelensky right now. That's a conflict. If you look up the word. And then I have a problem with some people saying that conflicts are so good, conflicts are so developing for us. No, it's not. It's me trying to bash in your head. That's not very constructive. But disagreements are constructive. If they are done in a safe environment, then you can develop. Then you can come up with new ideas. Then you can collaborate and so on, because you have a respect towards each other. But it's not easy. It's hard work being on that level. It's much easier to be on a level where everybody sings kumbaya all the time, feeling that life is good. Yeah, I come to work, and that's what some people call that's when you're fat and lazy. Just I'm happy where I am. Don't want to move. Management by not rocking the boat. All of those things are going on. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about still having an ambition, a drive to go to what I call sustainable growth. Meaning that we want to grow spiritually, mentally. We want to make sure that we care for our people, for our clients, but also for the planet. All of those things matter. So we have kind of this sustainable thought about it, that we always try to improve whatever we do for the greater good of us.
What's interesting about what you've shared there is that I immediately start to think about these massive organizations, and we know we're recording in a time where Google just announced they're laying off like over 10,000 people, right? And this is after Salesforce announces their layoffs, and all of these other companies that if I name them, we'll be here a little while. And, these are human beings that are now left without a job. We're seeing them posting on LinkedIn, and it's unsettling, right? I guess the reason why I bring this up is because I wonder, when we think about this idea of sustainable growth, can companies that become massive, that start out as something small, like Amazon started with Jeff Bezos in his garage, I think, right, and a computer, can a company that maybe it's easier to manage a culture when you have under 10 people, but can a company actually have sustainable growth and disrupt the market at the same time? Can there be an Amazon or a Google that entered the space with one person, one idea, and now employs over tens of thousands of people? Can they have sustainable growth in their culture? Can they actually have a strong culture being so large?
I would say that they don't have a choice if they want to stick around. It's like Simon Sinek says, playing the infinite game. If you only focus on the next quarter, you will be short-sighted. You will do whatever you want for you, but you don't understand that it will have, side effects or ripple effects in the future. I think it was the indigenous people in the US, what was it called, Iroquois, something like that had this seventh generation decision making. So they say that every decision we make today will stand the test of times for 7 generations. So we need to make sure that whatever we do today will also help people in the future. And the whole idea about sustainability, and I'm really into it right now, even though it's not my topic. I talk about workplace communication, how you lead, sell, cooperate, serve. But if we talk about the greater purpose for me, that's what we're into right now. Basically, it means that we want to fulfill the needs of us today, but not on the expense of our next generation, the next generation's needs for them. So whatever we do today should be cultivation of what we do, so we can grow things in order to also get rewarded in the future. When it comes to layoffs and things like that, again, it's tragic on an individual basis. Anyone who got laid off will of course suffer. Will be stressed out, anxious, frustrated. All of those things happen. On a bigger level, this is just how it works. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. It doesn't help you if you are just laid off, but it is what it is. I remember 2001. I was working in the telecom industry at the time for one of the biggest companies in the world, and we went into this huge crisis. So we were 110,000 people in our organization. Wow. And within 3 years, we kind of amputated that number to half. So the first layoff round, the team that I was in, I was heading a small team myself, but in the bigger team, the department, 100 people, 80% got laid off. So that was massive. Everyone around me, except me and a couple of more people, got laid off. The second time it was 50%, and the third time 30%. So it was tough. It was really tough. And I remember looking at this, not only experienced it because I was in the midst of it, but also looking from the outside in. How am I reacting to this? Well, I'm trying to inspire people anyway to do their job and to focus on customer value and all that while I was at work. But as soon as I came home, I fell asleep everywhere. That was my kind of defense reaction. So I could be in a dinner with friends, sitting in the sofa, just falling asleep, boom, like that, because my brain was kind of overloaded at that point, right? And some people have the opposite. They get sleep deprived, or they have all sorts of mental health problems going on.
Sure.
But it's not uncommon. The market shifts. People have no need for my services anymore. Perhaps I can't sustain it. Either I commit suicide for all of us, or I have to amputate, basically.
Right.
So I'm not saying it's easy. Sometimes people make it too easy. They just chop off the leg quickly before kind of looking into who do I really need here, or can we do something else? Can we find another way to keep as many people as possible while moving forward? There's things you can do, of course. So sometimes it's done too easy. I think too easily. But the fact that it happens is not new. It happens, in kind of, it's like a sinus wave. Sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. I think I said it now for the third time. But true. I have great respect for it. I've been in the situation, as I said before, with massive layoffs. I have friends who've been burnt out. I have been very close myself a couple of times, almost touching the wall with my hands, but managed to stay out of it. So yeah, it's one of those situations where things can be very uncertain, and the more uncertain it is, the harder it is for us to find a way forward. So everything in our brain is it's like a traffic light that turns red. It's just blinking red, boom, 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 and it's really hard to be creative and collaborative at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. You said something about in the beginning here about how they really don't have any choice but to focus on building an exceptional culture. And what I really liked about this is that it kind of validated a shower thought that I had. I talk about these shower thoughts. They're like the same thing as like 3 a.m. thoughts. You wake up in the middle of the night, you're like, oh, I have this great idea, or I have this amazing thought. Sometimes I have the 3 a.m. thought or the just before bed thought. Sometimes I have the shower thought. And my recent shower thought, my listeners at this point are totally used to my quirkiness about this, but what my recent shower thought was that, these companies, they are totally at our will, like as consumers. So if we look at Amazon during COVID, there was a huge upheaval of consumerism because there was a situation where an employee said that their rights were violated during the pandemic and that there were unsafe practices. We're seeing this now with unionization, especially in the US. We see this in parts of Europe where employees are saying we're not coming into the office and we don't want to work 5 days a week. We want to work 4 days a week, right? So we see how companies do have to bend to not only the consumer, but also the employee. And so the shower thought went on to allow me to think about how if even 5 consumers changed their shopping practices or their consumerism to invest in companies that had the values that they believe are, important, or that, contribute to a better society and, thus a better work environment, we could see massive change. Because to your point, they have no choice. But who pushes this choice? Who pushes the demand? It's, the employees play a huge role in this. But I think companies tend to respond much more quickly when their wallet is impacted and when their revenue is impacted. So just some food for thought there to expand on what you shared. And I totally agree. There is no other option. And I don't want to work for a company that sees another option other than having an amazing culture. I don't think anyone really wants that.
No, and it's really liberating where you have a company who says this is the way we function, this is our values, because then I can decide much easier if I want to join that or not. I have the luxury or fortune to say no to some of the requests coming in, RFPs and things like that. Hey, we are this company, we are a tobacco company. Do you want to? No, I don't. It's just not part of my value system to do it. You might be a really good person, but I cannot put my heart into it. I don't see the point for me. So that's kind of an example of how I can steer my own, to some extent, it is my kind of decisions of who I want to serve. Because for me, it's about me serving. Communication is not the most important thing in the world. It's an enabler to something important. It is what if you pick up plastics from the ocean, if you plant new trees, if you save lives, if you help kids, in their tough environment grow, you are important. I'm not. I'm the Sherpa. I'm the Nepalian Sherpa who helps you up to Mount Everest. That's how I see it. So my cause is helping those great companies to do good, or municipalities, or government and so on.
Right.
That's how I see it. Another thing is that I work a lot with international companies, and then you have regional cultures. How should you handle them? People say, from an HR perspective and the learning and development perspective and so on, and it is tougher. But one of the answers, at least, that I've come up with is that if you have a strong company culture, that can take precedence. So let's say that we have a culture of, you have different cultures when it comes to time, for instance. Should I be on time or not? You can decide if you want to be on time in your free time. But in this company, we have decided that time matters. So you should be on time to the meetings. Then what you do outside of the company is another story. You can come. I mean, my parents are from the south of Europe, where time doesn't really matter. So I remember being a young man going there, a young kid, for instance, and say, hey, let's meet 8:00 at that restaurant. And then we met 11:00 p.m. at a completely different place, and nobody even lifted an eyebrow. It was just the way it was, right? But in a business life, that would never work. And for me, it was really strange, because I come from a society where time is, important. If you say 1:45, you come 1:45, basically. So by just adding that part into the culture, the easiest way is to add it into the meeting culture. How do we, what kind of responsibilities do we feel that we have as participants and as leaders of that meeting, before, during, and after a meeting? If we can get that into place, like, for instance, is it okay to be on time or not? Is it okay to fiddle around with your phone or not? Is it okay to look at Facebook on your meeting or not? Is it okay to, and so, interrupt people, show emotions? Some things are okay, some are not. But if we agree on something in the company, in the organization, then that will be our culture. That's how we meet, greet, and treat each other. That's what we decided. And then we can pass this on to any new employees as well, as part of the onboarding process, and also the recruitment process. This is the way we want to function.
Right. This is really interesting. It makes me think about something that I had learned a little bit earlier on in my career in a training. I think I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but this concept of not culture fit, but value add, because culture fit could lead to someone who, maybe comes from a different background, not feeling included, because, what fits the culture. Like we obviously, companies need to, really appreciate and make space for diversity and equity, and of course, thus inclusion. And so this concept of value add is like, okay, well, if this is the company culture and this is what we care about, these are the values that we hold, how are we interviewing for that culture? How are we interviewing for those values, so that someone brings their own set of values and brings their own set of ideas and ideals, but adds to what it is that we're looking to create? And it sounds like that's kind of what you're referring to.
Yeah, it's good that you mention it. Culture for me is more superficial than values. Values is deep at the core. I probably want to hire somebody who share my values. If this is the organization's values, that's what I want people to also accept and embrace. Then when it comes to culture, that's more like the observable behaviors. And then again, we're back to the kind of different systems in the brain, because they are fueled by, if you have too much of the threat system or exploration system or the safety system and all that. So, and then it comes like a circle, up or downwards, depending on, if it's good or bad. So yes, let's focus on the core values and the behaviors that we want to include in those core values. So the problem I sometimes see is that when we do that type of work in an organization, it becomes 3 words on a poster, and that's it. And nobody remembers why we had respect or openness or creativity on that poster. We have no idea anymore, because that was 15 years ago. But if we always link that into, first of all, remind us of them, but then also link it into some sort of wanted behavior, that becomes our culture. So again, we should still feel that we respect each other. We might have different ideas on how to get to a certain place. That's part of the disagreement that might help us if we have a culture and a value of respect. So we show that value of respect by acting respectfully to each other, for instance.
If your company is remote or hybrid, then you know just how difficult it can be to grow your company's culture beyond a pre-scheduled Zoom happy hour or occasional lunch and learn. Well, this week's sponsor is here to solve that. They're called CultureBot. CultureBot has devised what will likely become the gold standard for growing and blossoming a company culture inside of Slack. The app is like a sidekick for any HR or people professional, automating a lot of the mundane tasks you probably are forgetting to do on a daily basis. Things like birthday and work anniversary celebrations, team shoutouts and kudos, employee introductions, and remote games. It even has health and wellness tips and conversation starters. If that piques your interest, this will get you even more excited. Today, I'm able to share a special promotion for listeners of the podcast. You can get your first 6 months of CultureBot for 50% off. Plus, if your team is under 25 employees, CultureBot is free forever. So if you're looking for a way to create a culture of appreciation and drive increased engagement and togetherness across your team, I definitely recommend checking out CultureBot. Go to getculturebot.com/humanhr. That's getculturebot.com/humanhr to get the offer. Plus, I've added the link in the show notes so you can just click right there. Now, let's get back to the podcast. Right. I as you were sharing this, the word respect, it makes me think about the environments that I've worked in where there wasn't a ton of that, and how those individuals who didn't display respect, either by giving or receiving respect, whatever that meant for them, that there was in a sense, potentially a lack of accountability. And so in this thought, I was thinking, well, gosh, how do we drive accountability? How do we drive a values-based culture? How do you actually do it? Because I think every company starts out with mission and then they create their values. And it's this kind of, you have to do it in order to be a company type of situation, unless the person creating the company really believes and sees the value, for lack of a better word, in creating values that then allow the company to have this, coming back to your term, sustainable growth, and to really build on this type of culture. And so when I think about this accountability, I think really the only way to achieve a culture for, that is tied to the values, that is a winning culture, that creates that safe space with that percentage of discomfort in order to continue to grow. It's a self accountability. We have to all, as individuals, hold ourselves accountable to this, because I think this is often where HR gets a really bad rep, that we are the ones that care about this. And it's not to say that other business leaders don't, but HR cares about engagement, HR drives engagement, all of these other, ideas. And so HR holds those accountable who are not a part of that mission. But the reality is, and I say this all the time on the podcast, that every single person contributes to a culture, good or bad, and every single person is responsible for their own behaviors. And so it doesn't just sit with HR. Engagement is not an HR issue. This is a business issue and business priority. So what are your thoughts on that, on the self-accountability piece, and where engagement is really stemming from?
Yeah, and I've been having the fortune of speaking to many HR conferences and so on, and for me, you're kind of my unsung heroes, to be honest. Doing all this great work, helping others, but who helps you? Who takes care of you? Okay, that's a question you can ask. Of course, it's for everyone. You have to have somebody that drives it, and that might be HR. I talked about meetings before. There's no chief meeting officer anyway, which means that we have zero knowledge of the waste of time and money we spend on bad meetings, which is huge, by the way. It's about half of all the meetings that are counterproductive and inefficient. So just calculate that number. But nobody is responsible for it. There's no KPI on it, which means that it just goes unnoticed. In this case, you have HR perhaps responsible for driving it. But if it stays within HR, doesn't mean that you have a culture or values spreading out in the organization. It just doesn't work. So it's every employee's responsibility, of course. But if you want to have it in a hierarchical order, of course, it's the top leaders first. If they set an example, lead by example, we will follow. If you have executives with perceived high empathy, you will have 70% of your workforce being engaged instead of only 15 to 30% if they are perceived with low empathy, for instance. So everyone is accountable from that perspective, but it starts at the top, and it could be driven and helped and supported and enabled by HR. That's how I see it. But what you're into also is self-leadership or accountability and self-motivation and understanding that I cannot just let anyone else do the work for me. I need to roll up my sleeves. I need to be part of it. I need to have that servant mentality. I sometimes say that you get the team you deserve, and serve is in capital letters here. You know, that's what you want to have. You want to serve your peers, because if you do, if everybody have the same kind of mindset of serving, then we will help each other and we will grow. There are, different ways of coming about this. HR, of course, does do a tremendous job often. Some organizations might want to go into more like goal oriented. We have these goals, who will do what, who KPIs, things like that. If you go that route, I suggest you have 3 types of goals. The first one, the highest level, is what I call identity goals. Who do we want to be? And now you're into the core values again, and the mission or the purpose or the assignment, and these are who we want to be. The next level is kind of the more normal goals, which is the outcome goals. What do we want to achieve then the next year, for instance? And that could be very result oriented. It could be about getting that market share or getting that turnover or getting that customers and things like that. Fine. But you also have the next level, the fastest kind of changing level, which is how do we get there? What do we do in order to get there? What is the next step I'm going to do in order to reach that goal that I have, in order to reach that purpose or that identity I want to be? So if they are in harmony with each other, then you have a tremendous force going on. But if they're not, if they're kind of separated from each other, we have this kind of identity goal. Not many people call it that. I call it that, where we say we really want to be innovative. But the goals that you set, the outcome goals, are only about selling old stuff. Well, you don't have a match, and people will notice it. They will see it immediately. No, I'm not going to sell that because I don't get the right margin for my bonus, so I'm not going to do that new project. Well, then we are not innovative, are we? And then people getting it kind of this discomfort going on, and they get disappointed, and they don't feel that it works anymore. And then they might leave, eventually.
Yeah. It's interesting, how you, I guess, position the culture and the values and the engagement. And it makes me think about potentially something that we missed when we were talking about engagement before, which is how to handle or how to navigate when people are at different levels of engagement within one organization or within one culture. And this is, a standard of being in business, right? Like there's always going to be someone who is this go-getter, goes above and beyond, you never have to ask a thing from. And then, the opposite, there's always someone who's like lagging and dragging their feet and complaining about everything and, really sucks the energy out of the room, right? To be really frank, we're all thinking of someone who does that. I'm thinking of someone that I used to work with who was this person for me. But it's hard, right? Like whether you're an individual contributor, a leader, whether you're in HR or not, you want to surround yourself with a person who's like always going above and beyond, and you want to be that person, hopefully. But then there are people who are sucking the energy out of the room. So how do we navigate that? And do we have to, most of the time I'm getting messages that people are spending so much time focused on building up those who are disengaged that they're forgetting about those who are super engaged and giving them just as much attention because they don't require as much energy, so they're not getting the attention. So how do we navigate that, and what do we do?
That is, of course, as many of the questions we talk about here, very complex. It sounds like I have all the easy answers for everything, but it's of course not. It's really, really complex. This is one of them, of course. You have the bell curve where some people are super motivated, some people are not, and most of our people, even from a performance perspective, are somewhere in the middle. They do okay. We should when we set our goals, for instance, we should probably look at the bell curve's mid, the mid side part where everyone is okay. That's what we have to work with. That's the resource we have.
Right.
And of course, if we want more people to move towards the more motivated ones, of course, we should make sure that the motivated persons stay motivated. The satisfied people who believe that this is nice, but it's a job, let's help them as well to make them feel good about that and contribute to the best of their capabilities. If they're grumpy, now we need to find out why, so that they don't become too disengaged. I mean, they should still follow us, lead or follow, but don't stand in the way. We want to be with you. Let's see what is it that drives you. Are you in the wrong place right now? Should we help you out? Where can you thrive? Where can you give us your best? If it's possible, then we can perhaps accommodate for that. But if you have those really bad apples, the ones that saboteur are saboteurs, sabotage for everyone else, you need to get rid of them. You need to find a way quickly to compartmentalize them or do something with them, because they will ruin the productivity for the whole team, about 30%. So we need to find a way to not let them be the toxic ones that takes over. And I have a LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my playground. So by the way, if we added? I think we are. I'm talking to your listeners now. Add me on LinkedIn, and we can share insights and ideas and growth together. I have a LinkedIn friend. She wrote a book about 10 years ago. Her name is Helen Lidstrom, about the workplace of Microsoft, I think it was. And then she coined this fantastic phrase about people being like popcorn. And I'm going to spread her gospel now. So it's Helen. It's Helen's gospel, not mine. But I'll put it into this kind of idea about Gallup studies and all that. We talked about that. So imagine that you have a bag of popcorn, right? The microwave popcorn, and the corns are us. And if I look at my bag, I have one always with me when I'm out, traveling, because I show it all the time. But it says premium quality on the bag. Premium quality by the finest corn. And that means that we don't hire assholes on purpose. We don't say, you know what, this department, the supply chain department, they're just too fun. Let's put in Boris there. So he's an asshole. Let's put him there so that they can, be in worse shape so that the rest of us look good. We don't do that. So if you look at the bag now and you say, okay, what do you need in order to make those corn pop, us pop? You need two things. You need time, you need energy, basically. Time is easy. Energy is like attention, respect, love, presence, whatever it is, to make them feel that they are seen and heard and respected and so on. And for when I put this microwave bag of popcorn into my microwave, what happens is that after 20 or 30 seconds, the first corn start to pop. Those are the actively engaged people. Those are the ones saying, let's pop, let's do this, come on. And then this, the rest of the group in the middle say, oh, okay, fine. The satisfied ones say, okay, let's pop. And they started popping. Then the other one says, oh, okay, fine, okay, we can pop. And then you have the whole bag, bah, 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 bah. And then you have some laggards, poof, 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 and then it's done. And they bring out the bag. It's a nice bag of popcorn, put it in a bowl. But what do you find in the bottom of the bowl? You find the actively disengaged corns that says, I'm not going to pop. It's not in my job description to pop. Let Paula pop instead. Oh, so you promoted Tracy to pop before me. Now I'm definitely not interested. And they go on like that with the blame games and the victimizing and all that. They are really dangerous. We need to make sure that, because if we put all our focus into them, we will burn the rest of the bag.
I love
Hopefully
that.
we don't have them so much, but if we do, we need to fix it. And I'm using this story. I'm sharing Helen's, gospel, as I said, when it comes to this particular story, because I love it so much. And I remember going back from one of those gigs, and the organizer called me up. No, she emailed me afterwards, and she said, you know what happened when you left? One of my colleagues came up to me and she said, we need to talk. I don't pop here. And I found that extremely courageous. I found that brave, mature, great. Now they can do something about it. Put her in a place where she can thrive and develop and contribute instead of being angry and disappointed and bitter. And if you can't, because there's no room for you, that you don't have any new tasks, then fine. Let's see what we can do in the meanwhile, while you find your way somewhere else. What can you do for us in the meantime? so we can coach you out to a new position somewhere else. I think it's life is too short. You should
That's
probably
true.
like to work at least. If you don't love it, at least like it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love this. I'm never going to look at popcorn the same, and that's one of my favorite snacks. So I
Yeah, me too.
really, I love this analogy and this idea. I mean, it's really, first of all, it's so visual. We can all think about that popcorn popping in the bag, but it's really true. And it's always those kernels at the end that you're like, why didn't you just freaking pop? Like, I could have had more popcorn if you just popped. And, it's really a perfect example of how those who are actively disengaged impact the whole system, the entire bag of popcorn. To Helen's credit, I think that's a genius example. And when I think about what you said, that those kernels unpopped, those actively disengaged folks and organizations, they need to just exit stage left. They also, and to your point, like that person who said, I'm not popping here, that was courageous. It takes a lot of self-awareness to realize when you are so disengaged that you are actively impacting other people around you. And I can only hope that in this day and age where people are so much more aware of their own behaviors, I think because of the advent of social media that makes you hyper aware of how you look and how you act and how you speak, I would hope that those unpopped kernels in organizations are like, you know what, I got to find something else. And just instead of spreading this, disengagement around, that they just actively make a decision for themselves, because people deserve to be happy. And to your point, if you're not going to love what you do, at least like it. And those unpopped kernels don't like it.
Yeah, and love why you do it, if nothing else. I have a poster somewhere in my house saying, do what you love what you do. But I would like to add also, and why you do it. Because sometimes I do tasks that I don't find particularly fun. Whatever I cannot delegate, sometimes I have to do it. But I know why I do it, because I love my job. I get to, travel around the world virtually sometimes, but also, in-person events and meet new fantastic people, and I can perhaps share some insights that will help them grow, and it's just amazing. But I don't love everything I do. For being a traveler like me, a global traveler, I don't like traveling. It's been a while since I liked that. No, not another airport. Oh no, we are late. Now I have to run to the next gate. Oh my God, the anxiousness that I have, the stress level I have sometimes, it's not fun. But I do it because I love what I do when I come to the actual place and venue, so I can talk to people. And for me, the metaphor I use there is, in Sweden, in the Swedish military, it's a tradition that every Thursday you eat pea soup, which is not particularly fantastic, but you do, and then you get pancakes.
Oh,
and I love pancakes. So for me, traveling is the pea soup I have to eat in order to get to the pancakes, which is meeting people and being there and helping them.
wow. I can tell that it's lunchtime for you and breakfast time for me, because I'm getting very hungry from all this talk about food. But I love that. It's the airport is the pea soup, and the pancake is the event that you're going to, the people that you're meeting and speaking with. I love that. Listen, I could speak to you for hours, so I have to physically stop myself at this point, because you have added so much wisdom, and you've really, the way that you think and the value that you've added to this podcast is immense. I really appreciate all of your insight. I feel like I say this every time, but it really is insight. It's allowed me to think a little bit differently, and hopefully it's allowed the listeners to think a little bit differently too, or expand on what they might have already known. So with that, why don't you tell us where we can connect with you and learn more?
Well, if you can spell my name, you will find me. I'm the only one in the world with that name, Antoni Lacinai. So you just have to find the spelling of it. AntoniLacinai.com is the website where you can find lots of stuff, including downloadable material. One of those downloadable materials will be very soon, at least, 10 tips for leading in uncertain times. That might be of interest. I'm just about to publish that as well.
Amazing.
LinkedIn is, as I said, my playground. Find me there, Antoni Lacinai. I'm sharing insights 2-3 times per week, and I'm also, happy to receive insights from everyone else, so I can grow and learn myself. Those are the main ones. I also have a small, obscure little Instagram account where I have some behind-the-scenes pictures when I'm out and about. So that might be another one. How about I give your listeners a treat?
Please.
We haven't talked about this. There is a hidden link on my webpage where I give away one of my books. It's called Employee Engagement. It's about 20 communication insights that will help you in your workplace. If you connect with me on LinkedIn and tell me that you have listened to Tracy's amazing pod, I will share that book with you, the link to that hidden link on my webpage. So you can download it for free.
Oh, that's amazing. I will make sure that all of this information is in our show notes so that everyone can get that book from you, connect with you on LinkedIn, and stay in touch.
The price you pay is the connection then, so I can,
exactly.
so we can meet
I like
each other.
that. I like that. I think that's a totally fair price to pay, that they get to see your posts 2 to 3 times a week and they get a free book. I mean, it sounds like it's the gift that keeps on giving. But I really, really appreciate you joining the podcast. And thank you again for all of your time and your insights here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tracy. And just stay great and keep doing what you do.
Oh, thanks. You too. Hey, just before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the show so that you are the first to hear when an episode drops each week. And maybe leave a 5-star review and a comment about how much you loved this episode. Plus, if you have someone in mind who would really enjoy this episode, make sure you share it with them. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.